Hi guys, and welcome to the CPFC podcast with me, your host, Afonso Greenbrook. Today in pod 14, I'll be looking over the result over Manchester United and be discussing the match, player rankings, my man of the match, as well as hearing from Pardew and what he had to say after the game. So let's begin. A much-changed Palace side couldn't end their Old Trafford Premier League hoodoo as Manchester United ran out victors by a 2-0 scoreline. An early Damien Delaney own goal gave the Red Devils the lead at the break, and they doubled their advantage through a fine strike from Matteo Darmian after the restart to clinch their 7th straight win against the Eagles on their own turf in this division. The scoreline could have been larger had it not been for the recalled Julian Speroni, who made a number of fine saves during the encounter on his first start since May. However, it wasn't enough to extend the 4-game unbeaten run as momentum builds towards the FA Cup semi-final on Sunday. Things got off to the worst possible start for the Eagles as they went behind after just 4 minutes. Darmian pushed his way down the left and put in a low cross into the area which looked to be aimless. However, Delaney inadvertently steered it past the hopeless Julian Speroni and into the net to hand the hosts the lead. 4 minutes later, the recalled Argentine saved an effort from last season's match winner Juan Mata, but Palace had a great chance to pull level on 12 minutes when Lee Chung-yong pulled the ball back for Emmanuel Adebayor, but the strike could only poke the ball wide when he was well positioned. Martial was next to warm the gloves of Speroni midway through the first half, but he was showing no relentlessness in his first appearance in nearly a year, and he pushed away the Frenchman's curling effort and then gathered a low Wayne Rooney blast a couple of minutes later. It was all United in the first half, and Rashford and Lingard completed a full set of attempts from Louis van Gaal's front five, but both were easily dealt with by the Palace stopper. However, he had to be at his best to make a terrific save on 39 minutes when Martial stuck through the Eagles' backline and drew the ball towards the target, but Speroni managed to dive through the air and divert it away for a corner. In the second half, the theme continued and Mata again tested Speroni, who blocked his shot after the ball broke free in the box following Adrian Mariappa's challenge on Rashford, but a resulting corner would lead to United's second goal. Daley Blind delivered the ball into the area and it was clearly seen to the safety of the head of Delaney. However, Darmian controlled it in his chest before smashing it from outside the D towards goal, and the left-back saw it cannon off the post before finding the other side of the net. Despite finding themselves 2 goals down, Speroni was determined not to allow things to get any worse, and he was excellent in making a brilliant double save when Rashford squared for Lingard, but the Eagles' keeper saved with his body before flinging himself in front of the young United striker's follow-up. There was a bright movement for Alan Pardew as James McArthur came on for the final 25 minutes ahead of the semi-final on Sunday, but on the later stages of the game, peered out with both sides making changes with the weekend's fixtures on the horizon. Now for the player rankings. And like I say every week, if you do have any agreements or disagreements, or just want to comment something about the game, do drop a comment below so myself and other fans can just hear and see what you thought about the game, and so we can add a bit more discussion to my channel and obviously the video itself. And it's a very interesting game against Man United. Some of the ratings may be lower than you thought or maybe higher than you may think, but these are based on my opinion. But if you do disagree with what I think, do comment below because I would love to hear what you thought. But we're going to start with the legend who has returned, Julian Speroni, the Palace's #1 keeper. So he's returned, his first start since May, and he had an absolute blinder. And, for that reason, I'm going to give Julian Speroni an 8. Speroni couldn't do much about the 2 goals, but he made some very good saves from Martial and Rashford to keep the scores down. So the reason I gave him an 8 is, you may think because he conceded 2 goals quite early on, maybe, he would have a lower rating, maybe a 6. But actually, he had a really good game. After the game, I compared him to the likes of Neuer. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that he's the best keeper in the world, but I was saying that some of the saves yesterday were phenomenal. His reflexes were really, really good. And, like I said there, Martial, Rashford, he made a good double save. And you heard that in the main review, Rashford were coming forward, Martial was coming forward, they had shots and goals, and Speroni was able to make himself big, stretch out, and obviously block these shots, and, some of them bounced off his chest, some bounced off his arm, his leg, so, he made himself really big, and was able to make these saves, and I think, if he doesn't get a start against Watford in the FA Cup, then I don't know what else he has to do to get a start, because he was absolutely phenomenal against Man United, and I think if it weren't for him, we probably would have lost 4-5-0. But, because of Speroni making these lovely saves, obviously really good reflexes, really good footing, ultimately that kept the scoreline down. And obviously we did lose the game 2-0. But, you can't really fault him for the goal, because one was the own goal, which was very unlucky. And also one was from outside the box, a very good strike. So, he couldn't save that. But other than that, a solid game from Julian Speroni. The legend has returned. And, I don't really know what else there is to say other than he was exactly like Neuer, making these fantastic saves, fantastic reflexes. And, there's nothing really much to say, And considering he's one of the smallest keepers in the league, and I think he is, he's only like 5'7" compared to most keepers who are 6'3", roughly. He was able to stretch out really far. And, normally Hennessy, I think Hennessy may have let a few of these shots in. But, Speroni, he's slightly shorter, but he's making these jumps to make these saves and, stretching. So a really good game from him. And I just pray and I hope that, he can get a few more games and hopefully beat the all-time Palace goalkeeper record and the appearance record as well. But now to move on to the defence. So Martin Kelly, I'm going to give a 6. Martial made Kelly's life very difficult and he struggled to cope with the Frenchman. Now, obviously, Martial, one of the best sort of wingers / strikers, in the league. And sort of in Europe, let's say at the minute, Kelly isn't the fastest player, so he can't really keep up with the pace of Martial, and I suppose that's what made it difficult for him. But, he did deal with him well, whether it, he couldn't keep up with the pace of him, but when he was able to get, in front of him, he made himself big, stretched his arms out, made his legs wide to make sure he could block any crosses. And obviously, we weren't very good going forward, so normally Kelly was very good getting forward, but, this game, he was able to get forward on a few occasions, but not as much as you would normally expect of a left back or a right back, the full back getting forward. But, he's still done the defensive duties. And once again, like Speroni, if it weren't for him, maybe we would have conceded more because, their crosses did, ultimately, their crosses were very dangerous and ultimately could have, damaged Palace even more than United already did. So, Kelly done a very good job there, blocking, the crosses, making sure he could track back, run back, as well as cutting inside, when the likes of Rashford are going inside, Kelly can go from the left back or right back position, wherever he was playing at the time. He was able to cut inside to make sure that they couldn't find a through ball or a pass, etc. So, a really good game. I'd say a good game. It's a good game considering we played badly. So a good performance from him considering that the whole team played quite bad. So now we're going to move on to the centre-backs. Now, to start with Damien Delaney, I'm going to give Damien Delaney a 4. And this is a bit controversial because he did score the own goal, but he was solid throughout the rest of the game. He was good in the air. So, he scored this goal, and actually it was very unlucky for him because he stretched out his leg because he thought, it would go off his leg out for a corner, but he didn't stretch his leg far enough, so it hit his foot and it went right in the bottom corner. So really, unlucky with that respect, but maybe he should have done better by stretching out more. But you know what? He still had a solid game. And, me presenting this podcast, I have to explain things to you. And that's one of the things you have to explain. He actually had a good game. He was solid. But he was just unlucky at certain times. And, some people may give him a low rating because he scored the own goal and ultimately gave, United the boost, which eventually helped them to win the game. But really, you can't really fault him for the own goal. It was very unlucky. But he was solid other than that. But the reason he got the low rating is because he weren't up to speed. He's not as good as we know he can be, and obviously because he scored the own goal. But obviously he got himself into a mess when he scored the own goal. He had a tough game and he did almost score another own goal late on, but luckily he learnt from his mistake and made sure that when he hit this one with his foot, it went out for a corner. So, he learned from his mistakes, and that's what we want of a player of his ability, because we know what he can do. So, we want him to learn from that, and he's done very well. He obviously, when he was in that situation again, he made sure he got the ball out so he wouldn't have the same problem again. Now to move on to his partner, obviously Scott Dan is injured. Well, I say injured, he's had a little bit of a injury ahead of the Watford game, but he should be there for the Watford game. It's only a little niggle, and they didn't really want to danger him getting injured, risk him at the United game, so they kept him out. But hopefully he can get a quick recovery and make sure he's back up to speed. But now to speak about Mariappa, who had a very good game. Because Mariappa hasn't played in a while, I forgot how to say his name. But yeah, Adrian Mariappa. So Mariappa did fairly well on a rare outing. He done well against the informed Rashford. So obviously, Mariappa would normally play at either right back or left back. But this game, obviously, we had a few injuries. We brought him in at centre back, and he'd done a solid job. And, I think him and Delaney had a really good partnership together. Although Mariappa hasn't been in for a long time, he's been out for quite a long time, he hasn't really played. Mariappa showed that he can, come into the team, make a difference, and just evolve around the team. And yeah, he did really have a really good game, in my opinion. If it weren't for him, because we maybe could have conceded a few more goals, because the advantage he has over Damien Delaney is his pace. Because Mariappa normally plays as right back, and his pace down the, that flank is very fast. And obviously that did help as a centre back, containing the likes of Rashford and Martial. So his pace, he was able to track back really fast and block them. And, that just moved me on to the blocks, because he was able to make loads of crucial blocks throughout the game, as well as finding passes on the rare occasion where Palace got a counter-attack. But really, a pretty good game for Mariappa, considering he hasn't played for a long time. And hopefully he may be given a few more chances, maybe next season, maybe in pre-season, get a few more chances to show what he can do. But, he had a solid performance yesterday, and maybe that will warrant him getting back into the squad. But, a good performance from him. Now to move on to the left-back, Papa Soares. So I'm going to give Soares a 6. Soares' great ball from the Rooney strike prevented a goal, and he struck on his task well on the night. He was perhaps fortunate not to be sent off for a high tackle on Juan Mata. So obviously Soares, once again, solid at the back. Was able to track back, because, the whole game plan the last few games is be defensive, so we can't lose games, so we can just make sure we get to that 40 point mark and then relax. And it almost worked. It was just unlucky that we scored them 2 goals, or we got the own goal and they scored a wonderful strike. If it weren't for that, maybe we could have drawn a game. But Papa Soares is a classic example of that. When he needs to go defensive, because he's an attacking defender, when he needs to go defensive he can, and he played really well. Obviously, we didn't really get on the counter-attack much, so he wasn't able to run forward. But he was, he was always compact. He was able to make himself big, make himself, wide by putting his arms and legs out to make sure they can block crosses. And also, another thing about Soares is, when he's got the ball, he's very good at clearing it from tight angles. So most players would either pass a dangerous pass back to the keeper or to a centre-back, so they can clear it. But, Soares keeps the ball, very good at holding up the ball, and would, make a really big clearance. And obviously, as he weren't able to attack much, he was more defensive, and we saw a lot of a very good, we've finally seen Papa Soares' defensive attributes in the last few games. And he just showed there with his sheer pace, cutting back, making sure he could block the crosses. It just proves that actually he's a very good defender. And just to go on to the high tackle, personally, he got a yellow for that. People saying it should have been a red. But personally, if I saw that, or that happened against my own player, or my own team, I would have been, quite angry if he got sent off. But, if I was the opposition, I would have been thinking, looking back on it, he was a bit unlucky to get that. But hopefully, we can have, see more from him. And hopefully he doesn't make any more of these stupid tackles in the future. But now we're going to move on to the defensive midfield. So Yohan Cabaye. So I'm going to give Yohan Cabaye a 5. So, one of these other players who had a slight off game, but, he's still done a job. So another under par performance from the Frenchman. He is a quality player, but seems to be struggling in recent games. And, I'm going to start with the struggling bit. I think the reason that he is struggling is because we've had so many games. We've had a game at the weekend, then we've had a midweek game, then another one at the weekend, and another midweek one. So actually, I think the reason he's being a bit under par, let's say, is because there's been too many games and he can't get, his fitness back up. He can't, get fit again. And I think that's a problem with the team. I think there's a few players who need the rest every so often and don't have to be in the squad. And I think that some people think that Cabaye should always be in the squad because he has a big influence. But I personally think that we need to rest him every so often, especially when we have, a game every 3 days, just so he can get back to his ability for the all-important crucial games. But you know what? There wasn't really much to talk about him because United did dominate possession, so a possession player like Cabaye wasn't able to have a major impact on the game. But on the rare occasion where Palace did set up a counter-attack, the ball either came through the fullbacks, or it came through the likes of Cabaye. So, he was still providing the chances, but obviously the forward men weren't good enough to convert the chances. But, an under par performance from Johan Cabaye. Nothing really else to add. But hopefully, I think with this rest, he can, make sure get back to his full ability for the game against Watford. But, not a bad performance from him at all. But, a slightly under average performance from him. And like I say, most weeks with players who have slightly bad games, what little they do is actually very good. So he didn't really do much in the game, but whenever he did do something, it was effective and obviously led to a counter-attack. Now to move on to his fellow partner, Mile Jednak. So I'm going to give a 6 to Mile. So the skipper was trying to pull out fires all over the field as United attacked. So like I've said in past weeks, Jednak, he's just in front of the midfield. He's in the midfield, just in front of the defence, trying to shore them up, make sure we don't leak in stupid goals, and just, give them a bit of protection. And he done that with ease, He's not the fastest player by any means, but he done well to contain the likes of Martial and Rashford. So he done a really good job, and considering he isn't very fast, he done very well. And obviously he was able to make the crucial tackles and blocks to stop their counter-attacks. Ultimately, he couldn't, his defence wasn't quite tight enough to stop, the 2 goals. But, unlucky with the first goal. But, the second goal, maybe the defence could have been slightly tighter. But, we can always be critical. But actually, it was a very good game from the captain. And once again, he was commanding, as usual, making sure that all the players knew what they had to do and knew what their position was. And ultimately, maybe, with this leadership, this is what we need. We need leaders like this. And hopefully, he can lead us to getting another Premier League win. But, a pretty good performance from him, and hopefully we can see more of Jednak getting back to a sort of a really top quality he was in the first season in the Premier League. Now to move on to Bakary Sakho, who had a bit of a weird game. He done some good stuff and he done some bad stuff, and for that reason I'm going to give Bakary Sakho a 5. Sakho offered very little threat and seemed to be a bit overworked. He lost his challenge with Darmian that allowed the Italian to strike and score. So he didn't really, obviously he was one of our best attacking threats throughout the game, because obviously he's a winger, so we can supply the ball to him. But the thing is, we didn't have many opportunities, so having an attacking threat isn't really good when you don't have possession and you don't have the opportunity to attack. So, for that reason, obviously Sakho didn't really have a good game. And, overworked, I think, because he's been playing quite a few games recently. I think he's a bit tired as well. And obviously his injury as well, still leaves him a bit tired. But other than that, he didn't really do much wrong, but what he done wasn't really that good. And, Darmian, he did give the ball away. Like I said, he wasn't really good with the ball. He could have controlled it and just cleared it out, just to, be it safe. But he let Darmian get the ball, and obviously he striked and scored. But it was, you could say he was unlucky because he wasn't able to keep hold of the possession and clear the ball. But other people may say that, he should have done better. He should have cleared it. And, I'm sort of half and half with that argument. But, I think Sakho won't be playing against Watford, or I hope he isn't, because I think he's more of an impact sub, because whenever he comes on, he has a very good impact. But I don't think he can, at the moment, his fitness levels, I don't think he can last on 90 minutes. So, yeah. Basically, that's his performance, really. He didn't really offer very much. He had a little bit of threat, but, we didn't have many counter-attacks, so he was ineffective. Maybe if we had a few more counter-attacks, he made it, would have been a bit more effective. And one thing I do say is that since his injury, his speed has gone down, so he doesn't seem to be running as much as he used to. But a thing I can credit him for, the one thing I can credit him for throughout the last few games is he's able to cut inside, and he had a few shots from outside the box, and they were unlucky to get deflected. If the player hadn't of, stuck his leg out to deflect the shot, maybe it could have gone top right corner. But, a slight off game from Sakho. Hopefully we can see more of him. We want to see better, the Sakho we know. But, I don't think he'll be playing against Watford at the weekend. But we'll just have to wait and see. So now to move on to his fellow winger and fellow central attacking midfielder, Lee Chung-yong. So Lee Chung-yong had actually a very good game considering he hasn't played in a very long time. And for that reason, I'm going to give him a 6. Now, this is one of the ones you may disagree with, but I'm going to give him a 6. You know, some people may give him a 4. But you know what? He had a very good game, in my opinion, considering he isn't a regular starter. So Lee was pretty anonymous all game on a rare start. He would have been hoping to impress ahead of the semi-final, but did very little to put himself in contention. So there is just saying that, you know, you didn't really see much of Lee Chung-yong throughout the game. But the reason I've given him his high rating is because he was making these runs, and he's not the fastest player, but he was able to make these runs, you know, dribble between players, and eventually get forward and feed the ball to Emmanuel Adebayor. But you know, he had a good game considering he's been out for quite a long time, and you know, he showed what we expect of him. You know, we weren't really in the game, we weren't really much of an attacking threat. So when the likes of Lee had the ball, they kept hold of the possession to make sure that, you know, United wouldn't get the ball back, and he'd done that very well with ease. He was able to keep the ball and then eventually find a pass. And you know, I think that ever since that goal at Stoke, he's grown in confidence, and actually he's becoming a very good player. And you know, he isn't the fastest winger, so he's ineffective with running, but he's very good at cutting inside, having these long shots, and also holding up the ball and keeping possession. So that I can credit him for. So you know, although we didn't see much of him during the game, whenever he was doing something in the game, it was very good. And another thing I have to credit for him for was he made a brilliant run. Obviously not very fast, he made a brilliant run to chase the ball down, and De Gea went to catch it, but Lee Chung-yong knocked it out of his hand. But luckily, I think it was Chris Smalling, or unluckily for Palace, obviously, Chris Smalling was there to clear it off the line. Because, you know, if he wasn't there, Lee Chung-yong would have been through on goal, and there would have been an open goal. Maybe the game would have been ended differently. But, you know, a very good game from Lee Chung-yong on his return to the squad, and hopefully we can see more of him in the upcoming weeks. And, you know, he won't be I don't think he'll be starting against Watford, but definitely I can see him as a very good impact sub. Now to move on to the ex-Man United player, Wilfried Zaha. So I'm going to give Wilfried Zaha a 7. Now, this may be a bit weird because he had a slight off game, but the reason I'm going to give him a 7 rather than a 6, say, that most people have given him, is because he was the best attacking option. He was the best attacking threat. And obviously, because we didn't attack much, you didn't really see much of Zaha, but whenever he did have the ball, like most players, he used it effectively and therefore had an impact on the rare occasion in the game. So Zaha showed the odd movement where he looked like he was going to spark into life, but failed to have a major impact on the game. Now obviously Zaha did set out before the game to make a message to, you know, say to the Man United fans that actually he should have been given a chance when he was at United, and he did show that. Now, although he wasn't at his best, and I think I'll go on to talk about why I thought he wasn't at his best, but, you know, he wasn't at his best, but whenever he did have the ball, like Lee Chung-yong, he was able to hold it up, you know, make these runs. You know, he was very good at running down the flanks, getting forward, and obviously we didn't get many crosses in, or I don't think we got any crosses in at all, but he was able to feed the ball into the likes of Sacco, Lee Chung-yong and Adebayor, and ultimately he didn't have a very good impact, or a very big impact on the game, but he did, you know, he added a little bit more pace to the team, a little bit more oomph, let's say, to a team that wasn't very attacking throughout the game. And I think the reason why he wasn't playing well is because I think, no doubt about it, he will guaranteed a start against Watford. And I think the reason he was not playing up to scratch or up to standards is because he wants to conserve his energy and all of his fitness for the game against Watford. And, you know, I'm fine with that. You know, we lose a game against United. United sort of on a up at the minute. You know, we lose that game. Was we really expecting much from it? I don't think so. But, you know, he was the best attacking option, really, throughout the game. But I think, like I said, he was conserving his energy for Watford. And, you know, sometimes players need to do that. Big players need to prioritise games which are important for the club. And, you know, in this case, both games are important because, you know, Premier League survival and the FA Cup. But I think he's put this forward because he knows that after this, if we win this, or even if we lose it, he can go on and make a big impact for the rest of the games in the Premier League season. Now, you know, he had a bit of an off game in a nutshell, a bit of an off game, but was still the best attacking option on the night. Now to move on to the striker, the lone striker, Emmanuel Adebayor. Now, he had a slight, interesting game, let's say. Some people may disagree with my rating, but I'm actually going to give him a 6 because, to be fair, considering we didn't have that much of an attacking threat, we weren't very attacking, I thought that he actually done very well in the circumstances. Whenever he had an opportunity, he took it and was able to do good things with it. So Adebayor was starved of service. He didn't get one sniff of a chance after Zaha found him, but his touch was unusually poor. So Adebayor, he's normally pretty good at shooting because he's got a powerful shot. He's a very good player. But when he did get the one chance in the game, he wasn't really able to take it, and his shot did go wide. But other than that, I think the reason he didn't really play well is because he didn't get any service from the likes of Sacco and Wolf. They weren't really playing up to scratch, which meant he couldn't get the ball. But, I think credit Lee Chun-Yong, because Lee Chun-Yong did supply the ball to Adebayor a few times to make sure he could get the opportunity. And there was one cross from Zaha, which went to the head of Lee Chun-Yong. He headed it down to Adebayor and it went just wide. So maybe if he had converted that chance, maybe we could have got back into the game. But, it was a pretty good game for him because he was making runs down the left and the right, getting forward whenever he could. And also, he was quite tall. He's quite tall, which meant that when the corners came in, which were quite dangerous from Manchester United, we were able to clear them because the likes of him and Delaney, very tall players, were able to clear them. So other than, that missed opportunity, a pretty good game from him. Maybe he could have done better with that opportunity. But as a whole, I think he had a good game considering he didn't have much service. Now to go on to the substitutions. So the first substitution was Jordan Much, and I'm going to give Jordan Much a 6. So Much came on to to make things more solid and did a reasonable job. So Jordan Much came on sort of halfway through the second half. He didn't really have an impact as such, but he was able just to solidify the team, make sure we didn't concede any more goals because we were in a situation where we were a bit weak at that time, a bit off pace. He just made sure, with his ability and his pace that, we could make sure we can hold on to the ball more and make sure we wouldn't concede any more goals. And I think that actually Jordan Much is a very good impact sub, and I've been saying that quite a lot. Most people don't like him and want him to go in the summer, but I think he's a very good impact sub. He's very fast at running down the flanks. Also, his passing is one of the rare players in the Palace squad that are actually sort of average at passing. He's pretty good at passing, and I'm very happy that we can get a player who can come on the pitch and make an impact like he did, by passing the ball around and by running. And other than that, he didn't really have a big impact on the game. He wasn't really an impact sub, but he made sure we didn't concede any more goals in the last sort of few minutes or so. Now to move on to James McArthur, who, welcome back to him. He's come back from his injury. He was meant to be out for the rest of the season, but the physio team have been working very hard with him and obviously the first team to make sure he can get back up to scratch. And actually, I suppose we could call him an impact sub because he played very well. And it says great to see him back after his injury layoff. He looked sharp for the 25 minutes he was on the pitch. So obviously James McArthur isn't one of the fastest players, but I think his injury may have helped him because he was actually making lovely runs yesterday. And he normally plays quite defensive, but obviously where we had the likes of Kabay and Jednak on the pitch, we couldn't really go that defensive. So, he was pushed slightly forward and he had a lot of power. He had a lot of energy, let's say, because obviously he was a substitution, but came on, add a little bit more energy to the side in the last 25 minutes. And actually, the last sort of 25 minutes or so was the best sort of period for Palace, because with the likes of Much and McArthur coming on, they added a little bit more, let's say, enthusiasm, because the optimism, you could score in the last sort of 25 minutes, and also just the energy they had. And, I think that did actually have a very good impact on the game, because obviously we didn't concede any goals after the game came on. And I think, McArthur, when he did play a defensive role, he just shored it up like, most defensive midfielders done. And, it was really nice to see him back. Although he wasn't up to standard, he was still at a standard that actually you can see at Premier League level. It wasn't like he was really off the pace. He was actually really on the pace, let's say, because he was able to fit in and get into the game really well, considering that he's meant to be off the pace because he's been injured. So a very good performance from both subs so far. Now I'm going to talk about Connor Wickham. There's not much to say about him because he only came on for sort of the last 10 minutes or so. So there's not much to say about him. But I am going to warrant him a 5. So once again, like Adebayor, he had very little service and, he didn't really have much impact on the game. So maybe if he had a bit more he was supplied the ball more, or he was supplied the ball more from the likes of Sacco, Zaha, Lee Chung-yong, maybe McArthur much. Maybe if he was given the opportunity, given the ball more, he would have been able to do more with it. But I think the only reason he came on was for fitness reasons, because I think that if Dwight Gale isn't in or isn't back from injury, or Connor Wickham still isn't up to standard, Adebayor is the person we're going to play up front in the FA Cup semi-final. And obviously that's why we brought Connor Wickham on, just to keep the fitness of Adebayor still quite high, and just, to rest him. So there you have it. They are my player rankings. So now we're going to... that was my player rankings and my match review. Now we're going to listen to my man of the match. So, like you've just heard, now to move on to the man of the match. And so this week, like I normally do, I have 4 nominations. As we did lose the game in quite a wonderful fashion, let's say, I'm not really going to discuss much about the players. I'm only going to discuss more about the really exciting players who have had a really good game. Not just in my opinion, but using my poll as well. So the nominations I had this week were Julian Speroni, aka the Neuer, Adrian Mariappa, Wilfried Zaha, and Mile Jednak. So before we start, I'll just give you the results of my man of the match poll on Twitter. And once again, if you do want to vote ever in my votes on my polls on Twitter, do follow me at the CPFC podcast, and you'll find my account there. So in joint third place with 0% of the votes was Adrian Mariappa and Mile Jednak. Then in second place with 25% of the votes was Wilfried Zaha, which means that my friend, the legend, Julian Speroni, has won the CPFC poll for the man of the match against Man United with 75% of the votes. So well done to Julian Speroni. If you happen to be listening, I don't give you any medal or anything, but you do get my sincere congratulations. So obviously I'm going to talk about each of them, and I'm going to talk about who I thought. But Julian Speroni, the reason I gave it to or nominated him is because he made so many good saves throughout the game, so many good blocks, he made himself really big, made really good stretches to make sure he can get to these balls, and ultimately had a real impact on the game. If it weren't for him, maybe we could have conceded a few more goals. And like I said, he was the Neuer of the game. It was almost like he was Neuer, because every ball that was being shot at him, other than the 2 goals, he saved. So a really good game from him. Obviously, Adrian Mariappa, like I said in the player rankings, he had a really solid game, considering he's just come back into the squad, being reintroduced. He could have done better, in possession. He could have given the ball, he gave the ball away a few times. But other than that, he was solid at the back. He was very good in the air as well, and I think his pace was a slight advantage. Obviously, Wilfried Zaha by far was our best attacking threat. Obviously, we didn't have a very good attacking game, but definitely Wilfried Zaha was definitely the best attacking threat. And, that's the reason he's been nominated, is because he was the best attacking threat. And also because his ability now to be able to track back, and like Mariappa, use his pace to his advantage to make sure he can both defend and attack and get forward. Obviously, last one, the captain, Mile Jednak. I think the main reason for him is to keep the team morale up, because obviously we've lost another game in the league, but he was able to command everyone, make sure everyone knew their position, and just to keep the morale up, before the Watford game, because everyone's probably feeling a bit down, the team, because we've lost another game. But I think he kept the standard quite high, kept everyone sort of in the mood for the game against Watford, and ultimately, once again, he was very good in defence. So I'm, personally, I think there's only one standout winner really. They were good, and they were very good performances. It's like sort of a spectrum, let's say. They were very good performances, and then there was sort of really bad performances. So there was no sort of in-between performance. But, for me, one standout player, and that has got to be the new Argentinian Neuer, and it's Julian Speroni. So congratulations to Julian Speroni. And, like I said, if you're listening, you're not going to win a trophy, but you do get my sincere congratulations. And I think that if you do not get a star against Watford, then I don't know what's wrong with Pardew, because you were absolutely phenomenal. You were world class, let's say, against Man United. If you were a few inches taller, a few centimetres taller, maybe you could have got to a few of the goals. But you know what? You had a really solid game with Speroni, and I can't congratulate you enough for making these phenomenal saves. And like I said, he was the new Neuer. because he made so many saves that you wouldn't expect him to make. So well done to him. But, you've got to bear in mind that Mariappa, Zaha and Jednak were, another collective of standout players throughout the game, which we did unfortunately lose. But, these guys stood out above the rest of people and showed that the determination to try and win the game. So there you have it. That's my podcast review. Now we're going to listen to what Pardew had to say after the game.
I was disappointed to concede a goal like we did in the first 6 minutes. I thought it was avoidable, and it just really kind of took a bit of ambitious out of us. I thought there was a lot of offensive players for Man United, and it caused us a lot of problems. So we had to really defend very, 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 very hard. But getting up the pitch, trying to get some possession, trying to get some game time was difficult. They made it difficult.
7 changes, Alan. It looked like it was almost one that you were prepared, if not to write off, but to take the consequences with bigger fish to fry on the weekend.
I think it was difficult after the Arsenal performance to get the same energy here tonight. So I tried to freshen it up a little bit. But we did have 2 or 3 knots. Scott Dan being our biggest worry for Sunday. But of course, listen, the FA Cup for Man United is going to be a big event. But for us, it's a huge event. And I could see in my players, there's a little bit of blurred focus in terms of that game. And that's understandable. A lot of these guys might never get a chance to get to an FA Cup final. And you could see a little bit of that in our play. And I hope that you give us a little bit of leeway on that, because I think that is understandable. Having said that, we've got some good game time in today. Adebayor played 70 minutes. Connor got another little bit. MacArthur, who we've really missed, he got 20 minutes, his first 20 minutes for a long time. So, and we've come through unscathed. So, subject to Scotty Dan being fit, we should have our strongest team to pick from for Sunday.
The keeper played particularly well.
He did, yeah. And it's a tribute to him, because a lot of you guys in here might not have interviewed him or know him, but he's such a great pro. And he has 2 games to beat Jackson's record, I think, at this football club. And I'm determined that he gets them this year, because his training and the way he's worked has really helped Wayne and Alex, and it was a reward for him. But I knew he'd play well, because he trains well, and he's a lesson to every young player.
MacArthur, 20 minutes after 2.5 months, is he in your thoughts at all for a starting position on Sunday, or is it just too early for him? He hasn't had enough game time?
There's no way I would start him. I wouldn't start a player after that length of time other than him, because he has tremendous mentality, tremendous fitness. So has he got a chance? He has. But I've got to look at the players who have done well for me in these last 3-4 games as well, and take that into account. But he's certainly a player that I really admire.
So there, now you've heard what Pardew had to say. That concludes my match review of Crystal Palace versus Manchester United, or Manchester United versus Crystal Palace if you want to be pedantic. But make sure to come back next week for my pre- and post-match review of Crystal Palace versus Watford in the FA Cup. So thanks for watching, and remember to up the Palace. We're the famous Crystal Palace, and we're going to Wembley.
I